Ask any writer, what is the most difficult part of writing a novel? And they will usually end up saying, the characters. They can't get their characters right. They can't see them. How do we fix this? What do we do to help you create characters for your novel? We're going to be addressing those questions and more, and we're starting right now. A lot of amateur writers have difficulties when they just find themselves staring at a white screen on their laptop because they want to write a novel. They have this idea, but they just don't have characters. The characters that they write end up sounding very plain or very dull or very fake because they can't see their characters in their mind. They might have a rough idea of what a character might look like, but they end up writing a novel where the first half of the story, the characters are just two-dimensional, fake, lifeless. And of course, ask any writer and they'll tell you that your characters come to you in full detail right at their very end. Well, it would have been nice if you could have had those characters in your mind right at the very beginning. Imagine how fast you can write a novel if you had your characters in full detail in your mind right at the very beginning. Is there a way that we can work around this? How can we get a character to be rich in detail right at the very beginning? Well, there is one little technique that a lot of famous writers actually apply, it's their little secret. And what is that secret? When they start writing a novel, they actually picture famous Hollywood actors in their mind, playing out the characters who they want in their novel. They might actually think of well-known famous actors from well-known famous movies, and they picture those actors interacting with one another. They can see those characters speaking, how they move, their eyes, their body, just the little mannerisms, those little things that they can put into their novel that an amateur writer may not put in because as an amateur, if your character is two-dimensional, you can't see those little things about them, the way they move their eyes or their body or their height or their clothes, because your character is still developing in your mind. And as an amateur, you run the risk of having your characters change. They change their height, their clothes throughout your novel because you're still trying to find them, to a point where you do end up finding them at the end, but you end up having to go back and rewrite your entire novel now with these brand new characters that you finally found on the last page. But as a lot of professional writers, they don't have this problem because what they do is they start off with a Hollywood actor in mind. Now, as they write their novel, that character might change. They may not remain 100% looking and sounding like that Hollywood actor. They might end up finding their character halfway through, to a point where their character, who they are in the novel, and who they started off as in real life, are two separate, completely different people. And the professional writer knows to go back to the beginning and make the changes where that character is not the Hollywood actor, but the character who they found halfway through the novel. But because they started off with the Hollywood actor in mind, it actually got the ball rolling. Because ask any writer, it's those first few chapters that take the longest, because you don't know where the location is, what the characters look like. But when you think of a Hollywood movie and you know the location and you know the actors, you're able to envision that in your mind, and it actually gets the ball rolling a lot faster. Now, maybe halfway through your novel, the location changes. The characters might change, but that's fine because you just go back to the beginning and you can just change the locations at the beginning to the new locations that you came up with. And and if your character changes halfway through, no problem. Just go back to the beginning and make those changes. But at least you got the ball rolling. A lot of writers, when they first start off, you see them writing really fast. And you're thinking, how can they do that? When an amateur writer can take maybe weeks to get one page done. But a professional seems to write at an incredible rate. And if you had asked them, how are you doing that? How can you write so fast? Chances are it's because they saw a movie that they liked. Something happened in that movie that they wanted to write about. How many times have you seen a movie that started off going in a certain direction that you liked it, but then halfway through the movie, it changed to something else, and you were disappointed? You wanted that movie to stay with what you wanted it. And a lot of writers will work this to their advantage. They will write their novel in that storyline that they wanted that movie to be. They write the characters as they wanted them to be. And as they write the story might change. The characters might change. And by the time they're finished, they have a completely brand new story. To a point where if you say to them, oh, that's an interesting story. Where did the idea come from? And they mention a movie and they mention characters. And you're like, wait a second. You're meaning to tell me that that movie and your novel are connected? And they'll say, yeah, but I changed it. They might have started off with a drama. And by the time they're finished, it's science fiction. And then if you ask them where they get the idea from, they mention a drama movie. And you're like, what? How did that happen? How did that drama end up a science fiction? But that's what writers do. They might be influenced by one novel or movie, and then they take that idea and they turn it into something new. Instead of, because what a lot of professional writers don't do, is just stare at their laptop, waiting for ideas to come to them. This is actually going to slow you down. And a lot of amateurs do this. They try to come up with ideas by staring at a white screen. But if you can come up with an idea based on a movie or another novel that you read, that can get the ball rolling. You're not writing a story that's identical to the movie. You're making changes as you go. A lot of singers mention this as well. They're influenced by a song that they heard, but they change the chords, they change the melody, they change the message to a point where they have a brand new song. To a point where you say to them, I like that song. What influenced it? They then mention another song. And you're like, wait a second. That other song and this song are connected? How is that possible? But they made so many changes that they ended up writing a brand new song. Think of a movie that you watched. Did it end the way you wanted it to? Did it take place in a location that you wanted? Imagine if you rewrote a brand new story with the changing of the location, the ending, the characters. And now all of a sudden, you now have a brand new story. The characters who were in that movie, you can see them in your mind. You can see them talking to each other. And you can start writing it down so much faster. And then you make changes more and more to a point where your story and that movie are nothing alike. In fact, we hear about script writers in Hollywood who actually write an entire movie with an actor in mind. They might see an actor in another movie, and as they're writing that script, they're envisioning that actual actor in their movie, to a point where the casting director will seek out that actor and say, do you want to be in this movie? The writer wrote it with you in mind. And chances are, a lot of times that actor ends up being nominated for an Oscar because of how amazing they were. Because the writer, when they were writing it, they had that actor in mind. We hear about this happening in Hollywood a lot. So you can use this to your advantage. When you're writing a story, picture a famous Hollywood actor saying your lines. You can see their facial gestures. You can see how they move. You can write that down. So that way, when someone reads your novel, they're like, wow, this character is so rich and so powerful right at the very beginning, throughout the whole novel. And you can then say to them, well, did you ever see this movie a long time ago with a certain actor? I had them in mind when I was writing my novel. And if someone says to you, how fast did you write your novel? And you say, it took me about 3 weeks. And they're like, 3 weeks? How on earth did you write a novel in 3 weeks? And you say, it's because I had the actor and the location in mind. But I ended up changing the personality of the actor throughout the story. I then change the location throughout the story. So by the time you get to the end, it's completely different. You then go back to the beginning and make those changes in the beginning to match the end. And what you end up having is a completely different novel than the story that influenced you. But because that story got the ball rolling, you were able to start writing so much faster because you could see it in your mind. Ask any writer and they will tell you that when they see the story in their mind, that is what makes them write so fast. Amateur writers can't see anything in their mind, and that's why it takes so long to get anything down on paper. But professional writers see their story in their mind like a movie, and they just write down what they see and hear. And you'll be amazed by how many professional writers are actually influenced by movies and novels that they have read earlier, in which they wanted that story to go in a different direction than it actually did. So instead of just being disappointed, thinking, well, I wanted that story to go in a different direction, and it didn't. No, what they do is they sit down and they actually write that story. They write down the story that they wanted to see, what they wanted to read. And they put the characters in there that they wanted in that movie. They make changes as they go to a point where they can now go back to the beginning and make changes, and they have a brand new story written in record time. It's something that you can think about trying when you sit down to write your first novel. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my website, where I have a tremendous number of blogs that will help you become the greatest writer you can be. In fact, I'm going to leave a link to my website in the description down below, where you can check out my website right now. If you enjoyed watching this video, be sure to check out my next video on the greatest secrets that you can use to write your novel. In fact, I'm going to leave a link for that video right here, and you can start watching that video right now.